shout out to Christine Brennan. Team USA, y'all need to stop playing. Hold on, wait a second. Y'all will recognize and appreciate Caitlin Clark as the face of this whole get up. Nobody's checking for these other, no disrespect. Great basketball players. That don't mean people checking for you. You mean to tell me y'all put other people's face all on the Team USA stuff and y'all left Caitlin Clark off of it?
Look at that reaction. That's not just disappointment, that's pure disbelief. USA Basketball just dropped their promotional materials for the December training camp. And somehow, the biggest name in women's basketball is nowhere to be found on the graphic. Not tucked in a corner. Not in fine print. We're talking about a player who single-handedly boosted WNBA viewership by 400% in her rookie year. A player whose jersey outsold every other female athlete combined. And yet, USA Basketball chose to highlight Jackie Young, Kelsey Plum, and Colea Copper on the promo instead. Christine Brennan, who's been covering Olympic basketball since 1984, broke the story at midnight on a Friday. And her reaction says everything you need to know about how shocking this really is.
To go all out promoting women's basketball, bring new fans in, and get unprecedented attention for a team that dropped in TV viewership at the Paris Olympics. That's right, the women's USA viewership dropped at the Olympics in Paris. Nobody was watching it. They would have added the photo of one of the player to this graphic, but no.
Here's the part that makes this even worse. The women's basketball team at the Paris Olympics saw a major drop in viewership compared to previous years. Brennan reported that ratings tanked because casual fans simply had no reason to tune in. The die-hard basketball community watched, sure, but the broader sports audience, the one that drives ad dollars and media momentum, stayed home. Now compare that to Caitlin Clark's rookie season in the WNBA, Indiana. Fever games averaged 1.2 million viewers on cable. Any game she touched turned into an event. Crowds the league hadn't seen in more than 20 years showed up. Arenas that usually struggled to fill seats were selling out weeks ahead of time. USA Basketball had the blueprint sitting right in front of them. They watched the entire WNBA season play out. They saw the TV numbers. They saw the merch sales. They saw international media flying in just to cover one player. And after all that, their decision was to leave her off the promotional graphic entirely. Now,
yeah, well, I've given it, as you know, over the last 60 hours. I broke the news right around midnight, Friday to Saturday morning. And I think on both fronts, merit and publicity, you, of course, mentioned it. You know, it's just a total swing and a miss by the national governing body, by USA Basketball, just a missed opportunity. And but I'll start with my answer by saying I have covered this.
Now listen closely to how Brennan describes covering these gold medal games. She talks about standing in the press tribune, the official media section at Olympic venues, and uses the word tumbleweeds to describe the scene. At a gold medal game, for the most dominant basketball program in Olympic history, the U.S. women's team hasn't lost an Olympic game since 1992. They've won 7 straight gold medals. They're arguably the most successful team in any Olympic sport, men's or women's. And yet, journalists who cover basketball for a living are skipping their games, because the audience simply isn't there to justify sending reporters. Bob Ryan, one of the most respected basketball writers in the country, talked with Brennan about this exact issue all the way back at the 2012 London Olympics. That was 12 years ago. This problem isn't new. What is new is that women's basketball finally had a ready-made solution fall right into their lap, and USA Basketball is choosing not to use it.
Caitlin Clark on that team, the team that so richly deserves attention and doesn't get it and won't get it without her, because there's just so much going on in an Olympics. On that same day, there probably will be 30 other gold medals given out, and sports editors and others have to make a decision. Do you go to Simone Biles? Do you go to women's soccer? Where do you go? It's not, there's just too much going on. You put Caitlin Clark on that team, and every single one of those guys that can't stand women.
Pay close attention to what Brennan says about male sports journalists. She's not sugarcoating anything. She's stating a truth most people in sports media won't say publicly. There are reporters who will cover the men's Olympic basketball team without hesitation, yet refuse to cover the women's team. And when both teams are literally playing in the same venue, that's not a scheduling issue. That's a conscious decision driven by perceived audience interest. These journalists base their assignments on what editors will greenlight and what readers will actually click on. So when they skip women's basketball, they're signaling that their audience doesn't care. But that entire calculation flipped during the 2024 WNBA season. Suddenly, the same journalists who wouldn't bother with women's basketball were begging for credentials to Indiana Fever games. International media outlets were flying reporters into Indianapolis just to cover a rookie point guard. Brennan even mentions a British journalist at the Masters who told her he specifically planned to cover Caitlin Clark at the Olympics. The demand was there. The international interest was real. The media ecosystem was finally aligned and ready. And yet USA Basketball left her off the Olympic roster altogether, citing things like rewarding veterans and preserving team chemistry. Even as the biggest surge in global attention the sport had ever seen was unfolding right in front of them now.
1992, Rich, how the men's team, how that grew basketball around the world, especially for boys and men, and where it reached Africa. Well, the opportunity with Caitlin Clark's popularity, Africa, Europe, Asia. Think of how many number 22 USA jerseys would have been sold. Money that could have then been pumped back in to help have developmental programs.
Now she's making a direct comparison to the 1992 Dream Team, and that's not exaggeration. Today, the league features players from roughly 40 countries. International TV deals are worth billions. And all of it began when the biggest stars on the planet were placed on the Olympic stage. Brennan's point is that Caitlin Clark represented the same kind of moment for women's basketball, not just in the US, but around the world. A No 22 USA jersey would have sold in countries where women's basketball barely exists. Young girls in places without structured leagues would have had a player to watch, follow, and imitate. The financial impact alone would have been massive. USA Basketball could have reinvested that surge of merchandise revenue into youth programs. They could have leveraged the increased global attention to strengthen international development pipelines. Instead, they made a decision focused on short-term team chemistry at the expense of long-term global growth and passed up the biggest expansion opportunity the women's game has ever had.
See what I'm saying? Christine Brennan gets it. Brennan gets it. Regardless of how you feel about her, she's been on this stuff from the beginning. Caitlin Clark got disrespected by Team USA when they had her coming off the bench when she was, 17? Y'all had her coming off the bench behind Haley Van Lith. Like, what are y'all talking about?
Here's why Brennan's credibility matters. She's not a social media commentator chasing engagement. She's not a young reporter trying to break out by stirring controversy. She's covered every Olympics since 1984. Written for major national outlets, and has deep sources throughout USA basketball's hierarchy. So, when she says she's witnessed the lack of interest firsthand, she isn't speaking theoretically. She means she has literally stood in empty press sections during gold medal games for 40 years. And when she mentions that her next interview is with a radio station in New Zealand, she's proving that international media is actively pursuing this story. That's not normal for a dispute over a promotional graphic. That's global outlets recognizing that USA Basketball just made a decision with far-reaching consequences. And pay attention to the timeline. The December 12th training camp hasn't even happened yet. This isn't the Olympic roster announcement. This isn't a major press event. This is simply the promotional material for a practice session, and it's already attracting international coverage. That alone should tell USA Basketball how massive their miscalculation is. They accidentally proved the exact point they've been denying. One player has enough global pull that her absence from a practice camp graphic is big enough to become worldwide news. Now,
by Team USA when they had her coming off the bench when she was, 17? Y'all had her coming off the bench behind Haley Van Lith. Like, what are y'all talking about? This stuff has been going on far too long. Team USA, y'all need to get it together. Respect the woman with the throne. Get down in the comments. Let me know what you think about this.
Now we get to the historical pattern that makes this entire situation so frustrating. This isn't the first time USA Basketball has mishandled Caitlin Clark. When she was 17, playing for USA Basketball's youth teams, she wasn't even a starter. She was coming off the bench, while Haley Van Lith was getting starting minutes. Think about that for a second. The player who would go on to break Pete Maravich's all-time NCAA scoring record, a record that stood untouched for 54 years, wasn't considered good enough to start for a junior national team. The player who would eventually generate more media attention than any women's basketball player in history was a bench option. And this isn't hindsight bias. Even at 17, Caitlin Clark's talent was obvious. She was already flashing elite court vision, deep shooting range, and a level of self-creation you simply don't teach. She stood out. She separated herself. Everyone who watched her could see she was special, except, apparently, USA Basketball's evaluation system, which somehow concluded she should be a reserve. This is why the promotional graphic controversy matters. It's not a one-off marketing fumble. It's the continuation of a long-running pattern in which USA Basketball consistently undervalues the one player who has done more to grow women's basketball than anyone in the past 2 decades. Now think about USA Basketball's own mission statement. Yes, they exist to win medals, but they also exist to grow the sport. That's explicitly part of their organizational mandate. Growing the sport means expanding the audience, increasing participation, creating media relevance, and building financial sustainability. And by every single one of those metrics, Caitlin Clark is the most valuable asset women's basketball has. She expanded the audience by bringing millions of casual sports fans into a league they had never considered watching. She increased youth participation by inspiring young girls and even young boys to pick up a basketball. She generated unprecedented media interest from outlets that typically overlook women's sports entirely, and she produced financial sustainability by proving that, when marketed properly, women's basketball is not a niche product, it's a profitable MAIN. They went back to the same formula that already failed. That's not just tone deaf, that's organizational dysfunction. That's a governing body with no real understanding of its own product or its own audience. And here's what makes it even more absurd. The WNBA just finalized a new CBA that dramatically increased player salaries and benefits. And that negotiation happened at the exact moment the league could point to booming attendance, rising ratings, and record-breaking sponsorship interest. Every single one of those improvements was driven primarily by Caitlin Clark's impact. Players across the league benefited financially because she brought unprecedented attention and money into the sport regardless of whether they play with her, against her, or don't like her. That's the real context. And that's why this graphic isn't just a graphic. It's a symbol of how far USA Basketball is lagging behind the moment, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. The new CBA doesn't happen without the leverage created by real, measurable audience growth. And that surge in audience didn't appear magically. It was driven by the one player who turned women's basketball into must-watch television for millions of new fans. Now, USA Basketball is gearing up for the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. These are massive opportunities to build on the momentum that exploded during the 2024 WNBA season. The LA Games in particular will bring hometown crowds, primetime TV windows, and global media attention that will dwarf anything Paris offered. But momentum doesn't maintain itself. Casual fans who discovered the sport because of Caitlin Clark need a reason to stick around. They need to see the player who brought them into women's basketball competing on the biggest possible stage. If USA Basketball leaves her off the roster again or continues minimizing her role in promotional materials, those new fans won't stay. And once momentum fades, you don't get a second chance to rebuild it. The 2024 season was lightning in a bottle. A generational talent, a compelling storyline, and a sports media industry hungry for a fresh narrative collided to create something extraordinary. USA Basketball can either harness that momentum or squander it. Right now, they're choosing to squander it. They're making decisions rooted in internal politics, veteran loyalty, and traditional evaluation metrics that no longer reflect the reality of the women's basketball market. They're prioritizing the comfort of the old system over the chance to redefine the sport for the next generation.